The arrival. The great hall of the alien empire was built to make visitors feel small. The ceilings stretched so high that clouds of glowing mist floated above, and the floor was polished black stone that reflected every step like a mirror. Tall pillars of crystal lined the path, each one carved with symbols of power and history. The human ambassador walked forward slowly, his heart steady, his face calm, though he could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. He was alone, yet he carried the pride of his people. Humanity had sent him as their voice, their only chance to prove that they were not weak, not fragile, not broken, as the galaxy believed. Every alien in that room thought humans were a mistake of nature. They said no species could survive with such a soft body, with such short lives, with such fragile bones. But here he was, standing in the very heart of the empire that ruled half the stars. Rows of princesses sat on thrones made of silver and light. Each princess was taller than him, their skin glowing with colors of violet, sapphire, and gold, their eyes burning like twin suns. They wore gowns that shimmered like starlight, and each movement carried the weight of 1,000 years of power. They were the daughters of the empress, the rulers of fleets, the heirs to a throne that no outsider had ever touched. And now they all stared at a single human man. The silence was deep, broken only by the sound of his footsteps. He walked the long path between the crystal pillars, each step echoing louder than the last. He could feel their judgment, their disbelief, their anger. Many of them whispered to each other, their voices sharp, their laughter soft and cruel. They had expected a warrior, a monster, or at least a creature worthy of fear. Instead, they saw a man with plain eyes, plain hands, plain strength, and yet he did not bow, he did not falter. The Empress herself was not present, but her daughters were her voice. The eldest princess rose, her eyes cold like frozen fire. "Is this the human your world sends to us?" she asked, her voice echoing across the chamber like thunder. The others laughed, their voices like silver bells, but their laughter cut like knives. The human did not answer, not yet. He simply kept walking until he stood before their thrones. He raised his head and met their eyes. In that moment, something strange passed between them. It was not pride, nor arrogance, but something deeper, something unshakable. The human's spirit shone in silence, and for the first time the princesses saw that he did not fear them. He feared nothing, not even death. The eldest princess narrowed her eyes. "Speak, human," she commanded. "Tell us why you stand here, when your kind should not even breathe the same air as us." The human drew in a slow breath, his voice calm, his words simple. "I stand here because my people believe we are more than you think. I stand here because survival is in our blood, not in our strength, not in our weapons, but in our will." The hall grew colder. The princesses leaned forward, some frowning, some smirking. But then something happened that none expected. One of the younger princesses, sitting near the end of the long row, whispered words that froze every heart in the chamber. Her voice was soft, yet echoed like thunder. "He's perfect," she said. Silence fell heavier than stone. The other princesses turned their heads sharply toward her, eyes wide with shock. The eldest gasped as if betrayed. The human did not move, but he felt the storm in the air. That single whisper had changed everything. The younger princess looked at him with strange eyes, not with hatred, not with mockery, but with something else. It was curiosity, it was hunger, it was recognition. The hall was filled with whispers now. "Perfect?" they asked, their voices sharp and cutting. "How could a human be perfect?" "Impossible," another hissed. "No species so weak could ever be perfect." But the younger princess did not look away. She sat straight upon her throne, her hands folded, her eyes locked on him. The human felt as if the universe itself had shifted. He did not know what she saw in him, or why she spoke those words. But he knew one thing. His journey had only begun. He was no longer just a visitor, no longer just an ambassador. He was now a puzzle, a danger, a prophecy waiting to unfold. And in that great hall of crystal and power, the silence of the alien princesses marked the beginning of something greater than war. It was the beginning of change, the kind that would shape the fate of two species forever. The test of strength. The words of the younger princess still hung in the air. "He's perfect," she had whispered, and the entire court had trembled. Now the eldest princess rose from her throne, her expression like stone. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "If he is perfect, then let him prove it," she declared. Gasps filled the hall. The other princesses leaned forward, their eyes glowing brighter. They wanted to see this human crushed, humiliated, broken in front of them. To them, perfection meant power, and power was only proven in trial. The human stood still, his gaze steady. He did not argue, he did not beg. He simply waited. Guards of the Empire stepped forward, massive figures clad in armor of living metal. They carried staffs that pulsed with alien energy, each step making the floor quake. One of them bowed before the eldest princess. "What is your command?" the guard asked, his voice echoing through his mask. "Take the human to the chamber of trials," she said, her eyes never leaving the man. "If he survives, then perhaps he is more than dust." Her words were cruel, but her tone was calm. It was not anger, it was challenge. The human nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. The Chamber of Trials was not a place for guests. It was where warriors of the Empire tested their bodies, their minds, and their spirits. No outsider had ever entered and lived to tell the tale. The floor was shifting stone, the walls alive with strange alien designs. Creatures bred for combat were locked within cages, their eyes glowing with hunger. The air itself seemed heavy, filled with energy that drained the unprepared. The human stepped into the chamber. The gates closed behind him with a sound like thunder. Above, in a balcony of crystal, the princesses watched. Some smiled, some sneered, some waited in silence. The younger princess who had spoken sat forward, her eyes sharp. She wanted to see not only if he would survive, but why her heart had called him perfect. A deep horn sounded. The trial had begun. The floor shifted under the human's feet, rising and falling like waves. From the cages burst creatures with bodies of steel and bone. They snarled, their claws like knives, their jaws filled with fire. The human had no armor, no weapon. Only his hands, his breath, his will. He moved quickly, rolling to avoid the first strike. A claw ripped the stone where he had stood, sending shards flying. The crowd gasped, but the human did not stop. He pushed himself forward, grabbing a shard of stone, using it as a blade. The alien beasts circled him. They were stronger, faster, bred for battle. Yet the human did not fight with strength. He fought with something else. He used speed, he used thought, he used the simple art of survival. When one creature lunged, he ducked low, cutting its leg with a stone shard. When another charged, he ran toward the wall, using it to leap aside. His breath grew heavy, sweat burned his eyes, but he did not fall. Every strike he made was small, yet it mattered. Every movement kept him alive. The princesses whispered above. "He cannot last," one said. "He is breaking," another laughed. But the younger princess shook her head, her eyes never leaving him. "He is not breaking," she whispered. "He is adapting." Time stretched like an endless storm. The beasts fell one by one, not from raw power, but from patience, from will. At last, the chamber fell silent, the creatures defeated. The human dropped the shard of stone, his chest rising and falling. Blood stained his hands, his arms, but his eyes still burned with fire. The gates opened, and the guards entered. They expected to carry out a corpse, but instead they found a man still standing. The eldest princess rose again, her cold eyes meeting his. "Impossible," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The other princesses could not hide their shock. The human looked up at them, his voice rough but steady. "You test my strength as if it is muscle, as if it is bone. But strength is not in muscle or bone. Strength is in the will to stand when everything tells you to fall. The chamber grew silent again. The younger princess stood slowly, her eyes glowing with strange fire. She looked at her sisters, then back at the human. "You see now," she said, her voice calm. "He is not like the others. He is perfect." The court was divided. Some hissed in anger, others sat frozen, and some began to fear. For in that chamber, against the impossible, the human had done more than survive. He had shown them what it meant to be human, and that truth was more dangerous than any weapon. The hidden truth. The trial chamber still echoed with silence. The human stood in the middle, blood on his arms, sweat on his brow, but his eyes were alive. The guards looked at him with unease, as if they had seen something they could not explain. The princesses whispered above, their voices sharp, filled with fear and anger. But one voice cut through them all, the same younger princess who had spoken before. "He is perfect," she repeated, her words soft yet unshakable. The eldest princess turned to her sharply. "You speak madness," she said, her tone like ice. "No human is perfect. They are frail, they are short-lived, they are weak." But the younger one did not flinch. Her gaze remained locked on the man below. "There's a reason he survived," she said, "and you know it." The court grew tense. For the Empire had secrets, old records, hidden away in the libraries of the crown. Prophecies carved into crystal long before most of these princesses were born. Stories of a figure who would rise from beyond their stars. A figure who would not conquer by strength, but by spirit. A figure who would stand when even their mightiest would fall. The human was escorted back to the hall, his wounds treated with alien light that sealed his skin like glass. He walked with steady steps, refusing to show weakness. The princesses watched, some with curiosity, some with hatred. The younger princess lowered her head as if thinking of something deeper. And then she spoke words that shook the hall again. "Bring him to the library," she said. The eldest hissed, "That place is forbidden." But the younger one's voice was calm. "If he is what I think, then the truth lies there." The human did not understand. Not yet. But he felt the shift in the air, the change of fate pressing against him. The library of the Empire was not like human archives. It was alive, walls made of crystal veins that pulsed with light. Books were not of paper, but of glowing stone tablets, each holding centuries of memory. The guards opened the sealed gates, and the human entered with the younger princess by his side. Her steps were silent, her face unreadable, but her eyes glowed faintly, as if she carried a secret no one else dared to speak. They stopped before a great tablet covered in spirals of fire-like script. "This," she whispered, "was written thousands of years ago." The human looked at it, unable to read the alien symbols. But she pressed her hand to the stone, and light flowed through the chamber. The script reshaped itself, turning into words he could understand. The prophecy spoke clearly. When the stars burn brightest and the empire stands tallest, a stranger shall come. Not of our blood, not of our strength, but of will. He shall be scorned, he shall be tested, he shall be broken. But he will not fall. And when one calls him perfect, the age of silence will end. The human's breath caught in his chest. He stepped back, his heart racing. The younger princess turned her eyes toward him. "You see now," she said softly. "I did not call you perfect without reason. The prophecy spoke of you." Above, in the shadows of the hall, spies had followed. Their eyes glowed red, their voices silent but urgent. They had heard the words, and they knew what it meant. If this human was truly the figure of the prophecy, then he was dangerous. More dangerous than armies, more dangerous than fleets. Because he carried something no empire could control. Hope. The eldest princess, furious at what she sensed, stormed into the library. Her eyes burned with rage, her voice thundered. "This is lies, this is poison. No human can change the empire." But even as she shouted, she could not deny the truth carved into crystal. The prophecy had spoken long before she was born. and now the signs matched too closely to ignore. The human looked at both sisters, one who saw him as destiny, one who saw him as threat, and in that moment he understood something. His presence in this empire was no accident. It was a chain set in motion long before he was even alive. The younger princess stepped closer to him, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "You will not be safe now. There are those who will try to kill you, not because of what you are, but because of what you may become." The human nodded slowly. He had not asked for this. He had not asked to be part of prophecy or destiny. But now he could not turn back. The weight of survival was no longer just for himself or his people. It was for something far greater. The library doors closed with a thunderous sound, and the human realized the truth he had uncovered was more dangerous than any trial. Strength had tested his body, but truth now tested his fate. And in the heart of the empire, whispers of prophecy began to spread like fire. The growing bond. The days after the prophecy were heavy with silence. Everywhere the human walked in the alien palace, eyes followed him. Some eyes burned with hatred, some with fear, and some with curiosity. Whispers moved faster than light. The stranger who survived the trials, the man called perfect, the one linked to prophecy, his name was now carried through halls that once denied his worth. The younger princess stayed close to him, not like a friend, not like a lover, but like a watcher. She spoke little, yet her presence never left his side. When he ate, she was there, silent but observant. When he trained, she stood in the shadows, her eyes sharp. When he spoke to the council, she listened, her lips pressed together as if guarding secrets. At first, the human thought her interest was duty, that she only wished to see if the prophecy was true. But as time passed, he began to notice something else. She did not look at him with contempt. Her eyes softened in moments she thought no one saw, and sometimes her voice trembled when she spoke to him. One evening, she led him into the gardens of the palace. The gardens stretched across glowing pools of water and tall crystal trees. The air shimmered with fireflies made of light. The human walked beside her in silence. Finally, he asked, "Why do you protect me?" She turned her head slowly, her golden eyes reflecting the stars above. "Because if the prophecy is true, then your survival matters to all of us," she said. But also, her voice grew quieter, "because when I look at you, I see something different." The human frowned. "Different?" She nodded. "My people are strong. Our bodies are like stone. Our lives last centuries. But in all that time, I have never seen one of us fight the way you fight. You are fragile, yet you refuse to break. You are weak, yet you stand as if you are unshakable." Her words carried no mockery, only wonder. The human did not know how to answer. So he simply said, "That is what it means to be human. We break, but we keep moving. We fall, but we rise again. It is all we have, and it is enough." The princess fell silent, her gaze turning away. But her heart was restless. For the first time, she felt the pull of something she had never known. Admiration, respect, and something deeper. She clenched her hands behind her back, as if afraid of her own feelings. Their bond began to grow, slowly like roots beneath the earth. When he trained, she offered guidance, not commands. When he spoke of earth, she listened with quiet fascination. He told her of oceans that stretched without end, of winds that sang through mountains, of children who laughed even when the world was hard. She had never known such things, for her people did not laugh in the same way. Her lips curved into a faint smile, the first true smile she had ever given him. But not all in the palace welcomed this bond. Other princesses whispered with venom. "He weakens her," they said. "She lowers herself to a human." The eldest princess watched with fury, her eyes cold. To her, this bond was not only dangerous, but a betrayal of blood. She summoned warriors in secret, ordering them to watch the human closely. If his influence grew stronger, then his life would end, prophecy or not. Yet the human felt the danger pressing in. One night, he asked the younger princess, Why do they hate me so much? She looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and truth. Because they fear what they cannot control, she said. And you, human, are something they cannot control. The bond between them deepened further. In her eyes, his fragility became strength. In his eyes, her power became beauty. They stood from different worlds, yet in their silence, they began to understand one another. The walls between human and alien started to crack, even if only in small ways. One night, when the stars burned red above the Empire's sky, the younger princess stood beside him at the balcony. The city of lights stretched out before them, towers glowing, ships rising into the dark. She whispered, "If they knew what I feel, they would call me a traitor." The human turned to her. "What do you feel?" Her lips parted, her eyes trembling, but no words came. Instead, she looked at him as if the answer was carved in her heart. And though she spoke no confession, the silence between them was louder than any vow. But danger never sleeps. In the shadows of the palace, blades were being sharpened. The bond between human and princess was no longer just a curiosity. It was becoming a threat. And soon, the Empire would decide whether to destroy it or let it grow. For in their connection lay the seed of change. And change was the one thing the Empire feared most. The betrayal. The bond between the human and the younger princess was no longer hidden. The palace whispered, the council murmured, and the eldest princess burned with fury. Every passing day made the human less of a guest and more of a danger. And in the quiet halls of power, betrayal was being shaped like a blade. One night, the human walked the crystal corridors alone. The lights above glowed faintly. Shadows stretched long across the walls. He felt the weight of silence pressing in, a silence too heavy, too perfect. And then he knew he was not alone. From the darkness, armored figures stepped out, their blades glowing with alien fire. They moved without sound, their faces hidden behind silver masks. The human's breath slowed, his heart steady. He had no weapon, but he had learned in the trials that survival was not about weapons. It was about will. The first assassin lunged, his blade slicing through the air. The human rolled aside, the strike cutting sparks against the crystal floor. He grabbed a shard of broken stone from the wall and held it like a dagger. The second assassin struck, and the clash echoed through the corridor. The human moved with desperation, with instinct, with the same raw strength that had carried him through every trial. But he was outnumbered. Blades cut his arm, his side, his breath grew ragged. Still, he fought, every movement buying another second of life, until the walls shook with a sudden force. The younger princess appeared, her eyes blazing with golden fire. With a single gesture, she summoned energy that blasted one assassin into the wall. Her voice thundered through the hall. Enough. The assassins froze, for none could strike against the blood of the Empress without fear. She stepped forward, standing between the human and death. Her hands glowed with power, her presence burning like the sun. "If you wish to kill him," she said coldly, "you will face me first." The assassins hesitated, but then melted back into the shadows. Their mission unfinished, their silence a promise of more to come. The human leaned against the wall, blood staining his clothes. "You should not have come," he whispered, his voice rough. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You think I would let them take you? You think I would stand by and watch?" He shook his head slowly. "You risk everything," he said. "Your name, your family, your empire." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but unyielding. "I risk nothing that matters, for what is a throne compared to truth? What is a crown compared to life?" Her words cut deeper than any blade. For in that moment, her loyalty was no longer to her empire, but to him, and that choice was betrayal, not against him, but against her blood, her people, her crown. The eldest princess soon learned of the attack. Her fury was a storm, her words sharp like steel. "You protect him," she spat at her younger sister. "You stand beside him even when he should be ash." The younger princess did not bow, did not break. Her voice was calm, but her heart burned with fire. I stand beside him because he is more than you fear. You call it weakness, I call it strength. You call it madness, I call it truth. The court erupted in chaos. Half demanded the human's death, the other half demanded proof of his worth. But whispers of the prophecy spread like fire. And even those who hated him began to fear that killing him might bring the very doom they wished to avoid. That night, the human and the younger princess met in secret. The stars above the empire glowed crimson, a warning of storms to come. He looked at her with tired eyes, his voice heavy. They will not stop. They will keep coming until I am gone. She stepped closer, her hand almost touching his, though she dared not cross the line. Then let them come, she said, her eyes unwavering. For I will not let you stand alone. The silence between them grew thick, filled with tension, with unspoken words. For in that moment, it was no longer prophecy, no longer duty. It was bond, it was trust, it was the fragile spark of something forbidden. But betrayal does not end with one night. In the palace shadows, new blades were sharpened, new plots were whispered. The empire itself was dividing, and at its center stood a human who should have been weak, and a princess who dared to call him perfect. The betrayal had begun, not only against the human, but against the very order of the empire. And from this crack, a storm was waiting to break. The final trial. The palace was restless. The assassination attempt had failed, but whispers of rebellion filled the air. Some princesses called for the human's death, others called for his exile. But the prophecy had taken root, and none could deny it now. The council decided on one last test, a trial that would end all questions. If he survived, he would be recognized. If he failed, his death would be justified. The human stood in the grand hall once more. The eldest princess spoke with cold authority. You have shown strength, you have shown will, but strength will mean nothing without heart. This trial will decide who you are, not with battle, but with choice. The chamber of judgment opened before him. It was a vast circle of stone, glowing with ancient symbols. At its center, two paths stretched forward, each leading to a fate crueler than the other. On one path stood innocent lives, slaves captured from distant worlds, bound and helpless. On the other path stood warriors of the empire prepared to strike. The test was simple. Save one, and the other would fall. Stand still, and both would perish. The human's chest grew heavy. This was no trial of muscle, no trial of survival. It was a trial of heart, a test designed to break his spirit. The council watched from above, their eyes sharp and merciless. The younger princess clenched her hands, her heart racing. She knew this trial was not to prove his worth, but to destroy him. The horns sounded. The warriors moved forward, their blades shining. The slaves cried out, fear echoing in the chamber. The human's mind raced. If he chose one side, the other would be lost. If he tried to save both, he risked losing everything. But then he remembered his words. Strength is not in muscle or bone, but in will. And it was not about choosing who must die. It was about refusing to let death be the answer. He ran forward, not toward one path, but between them. The council gasped, for no one had ever dared such madness. The warriors charged, but he moved with desperate speed. He slammed into the first, ripping the weapon from his grip. He struck the chains of the slaves, shattering them with the stolen blade. The freed captives stumbled, their eyes wide. Run, he shouted. Run while you can. The warriors pressed closer, their power overwhelming. The human stood bleeding, his arms shaking, but he placed himself between the innocent and the blades. He could not save them all with strength. So he gave something greater, his body, his life, his will. Every strike he blocked sent pain through his bones. Every cut burned across his skin, but he did not fall. He fought not for victory, but for time. Every second he allowed another captive to escape. And when his strength began to fade, he stood taller, because his heart carried him where his body could not. The council grew restless, their whispers sharp. "This is folly," one said. "He is wasting himself." Another spat. But the younger princess rose to her feet, her eyes burning. "No," she said, her voice trembling with fire. "He is showing you what perfection means. It is not power, it is not conquest, it is sacrifice, it is love." At last, the warriors stopped, their leader raising a hand. The trial chamber fell silent. The slaves had escaped. The human still stood, though covered in blood. His body swayed, his breath shallow, but his eyes burned with unbroken fire. The eldest princess descended slowly, her face unreadable. She looked at him, at the man who had defied their trial. "You should be dead," she whispered. He raised his head, his voice raw but steady. "Maybe, but if death is the price of protecting life, then it is a price I accept." The chamber filled with silence. The warriors lowered their weapons. The council shifted uneasily, and in that silence, the prophecy spoke louder than words. For the human had not chosen one path or the other. He had chosen both. He had chosen life over fear, hope over despair, heart over power. The younger princess stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Now do you see? He is not weak. He is not fragile. He is perfect, not because of his body, but because of his heart." The council could not answer. Even the eldest princess was struck silent. Her fury turned into doubt. The final trial was complete, and in its fire, the human had proven what no one believed, that humanity's strength was not in flesh, but in spirit, and that spirit had shaken the empire to its very core. The choice. The trial was over, but the empire was not silent. The humans stood weak and bloodied, yet unbroken. The slaves had escaped, the warriors had lowered their blades, and the council had no words left. For the first time in centuries, their laws, their power, their pride had been defied by someone who should never have survived. And it was not through strength, but through sacrifice. The eldest princess walked forward, her steps sharp, her eyes like fire. She looked at the human, then at her younger sister. "You would risk the empire for him," she said, her voice cold but trembling. "You would betray blood, betray crown, betray your people." The younger princess met her gaze without fear. "I would betray nothing," she answered, her voice steady. "I would only choose truth." The council erupted into voices. Some shouted for the human's death, others demanded his exile. But there were some, only a few, who whispered of change. They had seen what he did, they had seen what he was willing to give, and their hearts, though hardened by centuries of power, began to waver. The human stood silent, listening. He knew this was not his choice to make. He had done all he could, bled all he could, stood as long as he could. Now the fate of his life, and perhaps the fate of his people, rested in the hands of a princess. The younger princess stepped into the center of the hall, her golden eyes shining. She raised her hand, and silence fell. Her voice rang clear. "You ask if I would choose him over empire. I tell you this, I do not choose him against you. I choose him for you. Because what you call weakness is strength. What you call foolishness is hope. And without hope, this empire will fall, not by human hands, but by its own pride." Her words struck the hall like thunder. The eldest princess shook her head, her voice sharp. "You are blind, sister, blinded by prophecy, blinded by your heart." The younger princess stepped closer to the human, her presence unshaken. "Maybe," she said softly, "but sometimes it takes blindness to see what others refuse to see." Then she turned, her voice louder than ever before. "I choose him," she declared. "Not as servant, not as guest, not as prisoner, but as equal, as partner, as bond." The hall froze. No one moved, no one breathed. The words hung heavy, more dangerous than any blade. For in that single choice, she had broken chains older than memory. A princess of the empire had chosen a human. The human's heart pounded. He had not asked for her choice. He had not demanded it. But as her eyes locked on his, he understood. This was not prophecy alone. This was her, choosing not because she must, but because she believed. The eldest princess turned away, her face hidden. Her silence was not victory, but surrender. For even she could not fight against words that carried the weight of truth. The council fractured, voices clashing like storms. Some vowed loyalty to tradition, others whispered of a new age. But through it all, the younger princess stood firm, her hand brushing close to the humans. Not quite touching, not yet, but enough to show the bond between them was unshakable. The empress herself soon entered the hall. Her presence silenced every voice. Her shadow fell like night across the chamber. She looked at her daughters, at the council, at the human who stood, bleeding yet proud. Her voice was low, but it carried through every heart. So, this is the stranger who shakes my empire. The younger princess bowed her head. He is no stranger, mother. He is truth. The empress studied him for a long moment, her ancient eyes unreadable. Then she spoke. Empires are not built on strength alone. They rise and fall on the hearts of those who believe. Perhaps it is time we remembered that. The chamber was silent. The human drew in a breath, his body trembling, but his spirit unbroken. The younger princess stepped beside him fully now, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. Her hand reached for his, and this time she did not stop. Their hands met, fragile and strong, human and alien. And in that simple touch, the future shifted. The princess had made her choice, not only for herself, not only for him, but for two species who now stood at the edge of something greater. A bond that no weapon could break, a bond that no empire could deny. The court stared in silence, some with horror, some with awe, some with hope. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but it was more than prophecy now. It was choice, it was heart, it was destiny written by courage. And as the hall stood frozen, the human realized that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. For change had begun, and once it begins, it cannot be stopped.